Okay, we'll take another round of questions here. Arthur?
Yeah, there's another register one can look at besides religion or the political economy. That would be the register of the moral. Let me just say this as someone who works on China. You could make the argument that although Marx said that capitalism had the ability to dissolve all values, it was actually communism in China that dissolved all values. And in that sense, another way that it prepared the way for the current phase of global capitalism that we're in is precisely by dissolving not only the values of traditional China and not only the values that were impeded the development of the grossest forms of capitalism, but actually devaluing the values of socialism itself. And I would make that argument perhaps more generally, that if you took China and Russia, in both settings, socialism made enormous statements about the moral superiority of a particular ideology, but in its practice in both settings, undermined that moral superiority, produced a sense of collective hypocrisy, and led to I think, a very different sort of moral realm in which what should we say, the solvent nature of our current phase of capitalism, where there don't seem to be any values, where people are clamoring for social justice, no matter what the country or system is, that this is another preparation for the future we've entered.
In the back, is that Jegorsh?
Yeah.
Should you identify yourself, Jegorsh Ekir?
Represented the government department. From someone who is watching political developments in Asia from outside, it's striking that the only places which call themselves socialism are in Asia. The only places which are ruled by socialists are in Asia. The only places which have rights still, you can.
There is Cuba, after all.
It's not as serious.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that the indigenous revolutionary movements are in Nepal and India only. When you look at the time.
Yeah.
So there's something interesting going on that socialism, the idea, the organization collapsed with such incredible speed in Eastern Europe, in Russia itself, in Western Europe. There are no communist parties anymore, nothing. So I think my question is that there is something about a dimension to which you alluded in many of the presentations about some civilizational alternative thinking in Asia vis-a-vis Western. If we take seriously what Neil Ferguson is arguing in his latest book, and Peter Schmitter made this point earlier in comparing civil society in Western Europe and in Asia, that there are a couple of things: individualism, property rights, competition, which are so very distinct to Western experience, Western idea of how society should be organized. And that compares with completely different way of looking at those things in Asia, and looking differently at the relationship between state and society. That it may well be that socialism survives there in many varieties and dimensions because it's culturally closer to the historical tradition or civilizational tradition of those societies. It has been rejected so quickly in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe because it was really antithetical to those foundational concepts like individualism, property rights, and competition, and so on. And those things are always different in Asia historically and traditionally. So I wonder whether you see the feed between more feed between socialism and tradition in Asia than you see in socialism and traditional tradition in Western and Eastern Europe.
But we're still waiting to see whether the PRC outlives the Soviet Union in a number of years. Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Perry. Thank you for all speakers' wonderful talk. And also, I'm pleased to meet Professor Wang 12 years after 12 years, we met 12 years ago in your office in New Haven. I with Professor Cai Bingjian. This is I'm your colleague. My name is Zhang Qi. I'm a law professor at Peking University, and I'm a visiting scholar at Harvard Law School. So I have a question. Could I just talk a little bit, a comment before I could ask a question? The comment is about the book of Professor Wang's colleague. I only remember the subtitle was more necessary. I would rather agree more his maybe the title and Professor Wang's schema, the socialism 1.0, 2.0. And I agree with that it's impossible to have a 2.0 and 3.0 without socialism 1.0. But the subtitle is kind of a more, I would hope, that is more rhetorical, not serious, not so academic. Because if we study the role played by Mao before Cultural Revolution and during Cultural Revolution, we would have another maybe conclusion or another impression whether Mao necessary or not. By the way, there are a lot of jobs done by Mao's colleague, actually maybe bothered by himself rather than push forward. So that's a comment also related to the first round's questions. My own question is, I'm curious, could I ask Professor Wang, why didn't you mention the social dimensions and political dimensions of socialism 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0? And also another question, also the related question is, could you please talk about a little bit, or why didn't you mention the challenge of socialism 3.0? You mentioned the shortcoming of 1.0, 2.0, but you do not talk about the challenge or the potential problems of 3.0. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions here? Yeah, Jennifer?
Jennifer Panna, graduate student in the government department. In several of the comments, it seems like in the last 100 years, the development of socialism in Asia is viewed as continuous. But in Professor Wang's comments, in the three phases, phase 2 seems quite different and discontinuous in its ideology and its practice. So I guess maybe my questions for
Phase 2 or phase 3?
phase 2 in terms of phase 1, and then phase 3 coming after phase 2.
Yeah, okay.
And so in the other, I guess both the kind of other situations, in what sense has the development been a continuous process, and what sense has it been kind of marked by discontinuities, and what creates those continuities versus discontinuities?
Okay. Luke?
I have a question for Professor Wang. And you know that in China, I think some people say that there's a competition between Confucianism and Marxism. Do you think who will win? And that question is that Professor Hunting says that the Chinese core values are different with Western core values. Or what are the Chinese core values, do you think? Third question is that do you think that the socialism with Chinese characteristics, as the intellectual property rights belong to China? It's a Chinese theory. Do you think how much it is still related to Karl Marx and Engels? Thank you.
Okay. A final question? Peter, did you have your hand up? No? Yes.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm from Boston University. I'm a political science major. I want to sort of twist Professor Perry's question a little bit. Instead of asking in what role do the charismatic leaders have in socialism, I would ask In today perspective, what are the roles of institutions in socialism and socialist policy? We see there's a varieties of socialist history in these three countries we talked about, but we now see also a varieties of capitalism, of economic development. How would major players change the welfare regimes of these three countries? For example, I'm talking about maybe political parties, the state, or the labor union, or the society in general. How would we see a varieties of socialism today, and how can we?
So Peter Hall goes to China. Okay. You can take the rest of the time, we don't have a great deal left, about 15 minutes, to respond to whichever of these questions you would like. But please don't try to be comprehensive to all of them. Pick and choose the ones that you would most prefer to answer, beginning with you, Tom. And then we'll move
Shall
up
I?
here.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
why don't we start with you?
To respond to Grigor, right? I would mention as well, besides what you said, that Eastern European communism was imposed by the Red Army. In China and Vietnam, communism came as a result of indigenous movements. And there is this whole issue of legitimacy. In fact, revolutionary legitimacy has allowed the leadership to pursue a variety of policies which may or may not be socialist, but they use this claim to make their comments. Now, when somebody talked about continuities and discontinuities, to be sure, there's quite a bit of discontinuities, especially after 1986 in Vietnam when the economic reforms were launched, very similar to what happened in China 10 years earlier. If you go to northern Vietnam, the peasants will say it was a correction by the state and it's an improvement, it's progress. If you go to the south, people talk about the period between 1975 to 1986 as 10 or 11 years of hell, and what happened after 1986 as a return to what they knew before 1975. So there's both continuities and discontinuities. I think I'll stop there and let others.
Thank you.